Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're tuning in. I would like to welcome you to the next session, which is Revitalizing and Engaging with Colonial Heritage in Indonesia and the Netherlands. My name is Remco Verheyen, and I'm a external PhD candidate at Erasmus University Rotterdam. And yeah, can I introduce you
Yeah,
to my
hello.
moderator, Angelina? Hi.
Yeah, hello, Remco, and hello, everyone. I am Angeline Basuki, a heritage manager and architecture researcher. This afternoon will be your host for the next 75 minutes. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to be joined by our esteemed panelists, Herlof, assistant professor at Leiden University Center of the Arts in Society, and Nadia, the co-director of Pusat Dokumentasi Arsitektur, and Sadia Bonstra, founder of Culture Lab Consultancy. Our session will go in two parts. The first one, Remco will briefly introduce the topic of this session. And then each of us, we will share a short reflection of 5 minutes each. And then finally, we will have moved into a discussion among the panelists and with you also, our audience. Together, we come up with three topics of the discussions. We will have each 15 minutes of the discussion per topic, and all throughout our reflections and the discussion, you can post your questions in the chat box. So, Remco, can you briefly introduce the topic of the session?
Of course. Can we have up the PowerPoints, please? Yes. Thank you. All right. This is a beautiful opening slide. So yeah, I think the next slide is our content that Angelina already talked us through. So we will do very brief reflections from all five of us, and then we have a lot of time for discussion with the audience, and we prepared some topics for that. Uh, Here are our beautiful faces again. You see them double in the slide, and you see them on the side. So, yeah, let me introduce this topic. So, you're seeing here two photos. On the one hand, when it comes to colonial built heritage in cities, so whether it's buildings or public space, um, we found that in the Netherlands and in Indonesia simultaneously there are several things or several developments happening. You see, for example, on the top, you see a photo of people cycling on Taman Fathahillah in Kota Tua, Old Town, Jakarta. It's a very popular tourist destination, mainly for Indonesian tourists. You see a lot of, especially in the weekends, it's very crowded. Uh, Kota Tua is not in Jakarta is not the only town that is very popular that has revitalized buildings and public spaces. You can also see it in Semarang, in Surabaya, in Medan, etc. Yeah, and we were wondering, or I'm also wondering, like, does it matter that these um, spaces have a colonial history, a colonial connotation? Because at the same time, in the Netherlands, you see here a photo of the monuments Dutch East Indies in Amsterdam, was defaced in 2020 during protests, and you can see the texts there because before actually this monument was called the Van Heuts Monument. Van Heuts was an infamous Dutch general from the colonial army who eventually managed to conquer Aceh in northern Sumatra. And here, during these protests in 2020, this monument in Amsterdam was painted on. And that's, of course, something we see happening a lot, not just in the Netherlands, but also in other cities in the world at different kinds of protests. So, I would now like to invite our first speaker, Gerlof. Are you ready for your reflection?
Yes, thank you so much. Um, There we go. Yeah, so my reflection, I'm working mostly on colonial heritage in the Netherlands in Dutch public space, and I'll have a very tiny, quick case study to get to the reflection questions that are about how can we engage with controversial colonial heritage in Dutch public space. I can't really see the faces of the audience members, so it's difficult for me to read the room. I'm guessing everybody knows this, so I'm going to go very quickly. This is Jan Pieterszoon Koen, who committed a genocide in Banda in 1621, killing 14,000 people, more or less, and then enslaving the survivors, repopulating the area with enslaved people from elsewhere, and burned down most of the plantations there, the nutmeg plantations. And this is how he kickstarted the so-called the spice monopoly that made the Netherlands rich and famous and kickstarted the Golden Age. Um, so there was a time where the Dutch were very proud of this. This is 250 years later, in the late 19th century. A statue was erected for him in his birthplace, Hoorn. So this is 250 years after his lifetime. It was part of a nationwide project to develop a proud Dutch national identity. Statues were erected not just of colonizers, but also of other famous Dutch people like artists, church leaders, philosophers, politicians, scientists, etc. And Koen's statue was one of them. Now, there is a tendency, especially in reactionary the Netherlands, to believe that controversies surrounding these statues are something new, something of the new woke era that we find ourselves in. But in fact, the statue of Koen, to stay on topic, has been controversial from the very beginning. It was even controversial before it was built, and it was only still an initiative among other initiatives. Here's a quote from historian Thiele, who said, "For the sake of monopoly, the affluent population of a beautiful archipelago was murdered in a cold-blooded manner." In the early 1930s, famous Dutch theater writer Slauerhoff wrote a critical piece on Jan Pieterszoon Koen's life and actions, which was so critical and bad for national identity, deemed to be bad for national identity, that it was banned, and it was only performed for the first time after Slauerhoff's lifetime. On the right, you see pamphlet for the Socialist Party in the 1930s, it's in Dutch, but they're basically saying, let's do a protest against the so-called Koen Day. They used to celebrate Koen's birthday every 5 years or something, and they were against it because it translates to on Monday, government people and other rich people will celebrate, in arrogant wording, the exploitation of the Indonesian people. That's the 1930s. And then finally, on the photograph, you see a protest from the 1980s, a Malaccan warrior, one of my uncles, who dressed up like a traditional warrior and offered a black book full of Koen's crimes to the then Crown Prince Klaus on the photo, also during one of the Koen celebrations that the city of Hoorn used to do. More recently, in 2011, the statue actually fell over, and this was, mind you, not an activist action. It just fell over accidentally after the annual fair. A crane truck just bumped into it, and it fell off the pedestal, quite literally. And it had to be restored. It was damaged quite heavily. It cost around 20,000 euros. So there were a lot of protests at the time saying the statue is already on the ground. Why not just take the next step and put it somewhere else? For example, in the museum, the West Frisian Museum that is right at the same square, it would cost very little money to for example, put it in the museum context. Instead, the municipality decided to bring it back on the pedestal and update the plaque. This is a fragment from the plaque that said the new plaque that says the statue is controversial. According to critics, Koen's violent mercantilism in the East Indian archipelago does not deserve to be honored. And this is what my research is about. I call it a form of repressive tolerance, where official discourse tries to integrate protest against the national discourse, in this case, protest against the Koen statue, or the idea of that Koen is a hero. And in the same gesture, by incorporating it into the discourse, also neutralizing it. They now give the dissenting voices, a podium. They said some people think Koen is actually a perpetrator, and by doing that, they can put the statue back up, and nothing has to change. So, last slide. This also leads into the discussion, and I would like to have your thoughts on it eventually. There's a lot of theory and research on how to deal with controversial heritage practice in post-colonial countries like the Netherlands, and these are four options that you see on the right side. You can deny the problem, that's called repression as a municipality, for example. You can go into the binary opposition of remove the statue or keep it where it is. That's removal. Reframing is kind of what they did with the updated plaque. It would mean a mediation between repress and remove. You would keep the statue where it is, but you would try to recontextualize the statue, say more about its history in an attempt to make people make up their own minds about this controversial history. The limitation of this is that it often leads to what I call repressive tolerance via Herbert Marcuse, the philosopher, because it feels like there's a lot of tolerance for different ideas, but in the end, the status quo stays the status quo. The final option would be what they call the theory that I'm quoting here, re-emergence, which would be kind of like bringing the statue back alive. There have been Black Lives Matter protests since post 2020 that have tried to do this, where a statue actually becomes a living space of negotiation and conversation, where people can actively debate history together and post-colonial memory. The limitation of this is that it is difficult to do successfully, and very often it comes down to a form of reframing, and it leads to the same kind of non-results. But that's why it says at the left bottom corner, re-emergence is the moment we move clearly beyond any dichotomous thinking of repression and removal, putting into play notions of decolonial futures, which do more than restating the horrific fault lines of the past, but which do so without succumbing to the narrative, an effective domestication of reframing. So, in other words, it's easier said than done to do this properly. It sounds very idealistic, and this is also maybe the start of it could lead into the reflection where we can ask ourselves, has this happened? Do you know any concrete examples where this has happened successfully? Um, what do you think about this four-step understanding of controversial colonial heritage? I'd be happy to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much. And the next speaker is Nadia. Please go ahead. Or are we going straight into the yeah?
Nadia, is your sound working? I can see you, but you're not moving. Otherwise, we can also continue with Angelina.
Okay.
Shall we do that?
Yeah.
Yes, there we go. Floor is yours. I'm clocking you. 5 minutes.
All right. So yeah, actually, I should in response to Banadia's, which you will see later from her examples, that there are a lot of revitalizing and restoration activities on colonial heritage in Indonesia is happening, and Mbak Nadia will show a lot of public initiatives. And I would like also to expose, based from my own experience in Kota Tua Jakarta, that there are also private initiatives happening, at least in the last 10 years in Jakarta. We have consortium Kota Tua Jakarta, and then M Block Group in Block M, but also a lot of individuals trying to restore and then reactivate a lot of colonial buildings. This show how the heritage not only to be revitalized into a living spaces, but also could be relevant for today's needs. Apparently, a lot of the projects move faster from one to the other. Most of it because the MRT stations that were built uh, 5 years ago in Block M, and soon in the next 2 years in Kota Tua Jakarta as well. So this area become more and more attractive for younger audiences as well, and it could be making the heritage even relevant, not only as something distant from us, but also part of the daily life. But apparently, the restoration, we face similar challenges, both for the public and the private initiatives. So the projects faces challenges such as the high cost of the restoration, and then complex stakeholders, not only owners but also communities that have sense of belonging, also local government, and then unclear regulations. And maybe to add, in the case of Kota Tua Jakarta, on it's lay on two different municipality between North and West Jakarta, which they have different views and visions on Kota Tua developments. Also, we face challenge in the intangible part, like between the authenticity and the new use that are proposed during the adaptive reuse of the buildings, as well the sustainability. So these obstacles, in order to face it, there are no, like, single actor that can solve this alone. So we really need a mutual agreement and heavy communication between stakeholders and communities as well. So I'd like to go a bit deeper on the public versus private challenge on the subject. Um, while the public projects, mostly they often struggle with the bureaucracy and the maintenance after the cutting the ribbons and the inauguration, and then it's it it's becoming again abandoned. While for the private initiatives, uh, they must secure financial sustainability in order to continue the building operations. And also, um, in my experience, there are risks of gentrification as well. So each of the challenge have their own unique pressures, that could shape how a revitalization could be considered successful. At least from lessons from Kota Tua Jakarta, the activation matters as much as the restoration project. Um, I
Keep
learned
on
that
me.
the adaptive reuse and creative programming are just as important as the restoration itself. It is not enough to just repair a building, but the real challenge is to keeping it alive and relevant for the communities. And other important thing to focus on adaptive reuse approach is how to ensure that the new use function without disconnecting from the history of the building. So, from the restoration to
Angie,
relevance, yeah.
please wrap up. Your time is
Okay.
up.
So yeah, I think for the future, the management plan will be crucial to keep the heritage sustainable, and revitalization should close the distance between people and the monuments, and turning the heritage into spaces where people could gather uh, to work and also to connect with their history. Thank you. And so for the next, is Nadia
Yes,
can
Nadia is back.
okay.
Hopefully,
So
we can hear her this time.
yeah, so
Okay,
the
thank
floor
you.
is yours. So,
Could you hear me?
yes.
Hello?
Yes,
Okay. Oh, thanks God.
I will move your slides. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Oh, here we are.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Um, in this presentation, I would like to share with you my experience in some restoration project of colonial heritage building that were initiated and done by the government institution. And in Indonesia, those carrying out restoration project are the government, the private sector, individuals, and communities. NG already explained about the restoration project that done not by the government. These are restoration project has their own characteristics. And here is some example of restoration project done by the government in Indonesia. And one of the characteristic is that most of them are the large scale project. So, in this slide, you see the restoration of Fort Willem I in Ambarawa, Central Java. Ambarawa is a small town south of Semarang, and this fort was built in 1836 as a main fort in the defense systems of Java Island in the 19th century. This fort now is belonging to the Military Regional Command Fort Diponegoro. And before the restoration carried out, most of the fort's buildings were damaged, and some, almost half, were used as a prisons. In 2021, the Ministry of Public Works began the stage one of the restoration process with the documentation and studies, followed by the restoration planning the next year and the implementation in 2023. The phase one of the restoration only covers the part of the fort that was controlled by the military, while the parts of the fort that at that time used and still at present as a prison were not restored. So it's only half of the fort being restored. And the restoration project completed in the December last year at a cost of almost 160 billion rupiah. And in this slide, you can see the restoration process. This is I put the photos of the high rank Ministry of Public Works official that visit that restoration projects. And it's already finished, but I don't know which function are in these forts because some of my colleagues that visited this fort told me that this fort is still empty. And the other was the restoration of Fort Vandenbosch in Ngawi, East Java. This fort was built in 1839 until 1845, and it was also part of the Java Islands defense system in the 19th century. And the owner of the fort is the Military Regional Command 5th Brawijaya. I can say that this project is one of good examples of the collaboration between the government institution. In this project, the central government, Ministry of Public Works, provide funding for the pre-restoration work, the restoration planning, and the implementation of the restoration, namely around 125 billion rupiahs. And sorry, the Ministry of Education and Culture provides technical assistance through the East Java Cultural Preservation Center. Also, the Ngawi Regency government is conducting studies on adaptive reuse and management in preparation for managing this fort. The restoration process itself took about 2 years, and this project was completed in December 2022. And again, since the December 2022 until now, there is no function in this fort except there is one small cafe inside. So most of the forts building are still empty, waiting to be used. The next is the restoration of the A.A. Maramis building of Ministry of Finance in Jakarta. This building was erected in 1809 at the initiative of Governor General Dandos. The construction of this building was completed in 1827, and this building also marks the move of the city center of Batavia to the south, to the area known as Weltevreden at that time. And now the location is located in the center of Jakarta. And this building is
Nadia, you
still,
have 1 minute
yeah.
left. You have to wrap up.
Okay. Okay, that this building was restoration was finished in December 2026, and again there's no function in it. The last is the restoration of Bank Mandiri Heritage Building in Kota Tua, Jakarta, and this already finished because the restoration is only for the facade, and it's is still used as a bank. So my reflection is mostly the government restoration project is a large-scale project, but most of them didn't have any function, any planning for function until it was finished, the restoration. So most of them are still empty. Thank you. Give it back to Remco.
Thank you, Nadia. All right. I will go with the slides myself. Oh. Sorry, Angie. Your slides again. All right. Time for my reflection. I'm gonna after the stories of Gerlof, Nadia, and Angelina, we have already seen a little bit more about what is happening in both the Netherlands and in Indonesia when it comes to revitalizing heritage and this type of history. Here on this slide, I'm showing you a little bit more about what is happening in the Netherlands. So you see, there has for a long time already been a lot of attention for architectural buildings from the colonial period in Indonesia. You see an example of one of such publications on the top left. But around 2020, a lot of very interesting things were happening at the same time. You see the second image you see is a film poster of movie The East or The Oost in the Netherlands, which was a feature film about a boy who ends up in the Indonesian fighting on the Dutch side in the Indonesian War of Independence, initially thinking he was there to do the right thing. But while he was there in the war situation, he realized that, it was not the case. And this film, this was the first time that such a film for a big audience was made for the Dutch, in the Netherlands. So that was quite remarkable. In the same period, King Willem-Alexander of the Netherlands apologized when he was on a state visit to Indonesia to the then Indonesian President Jokowi for the Dutch violence during the Indonesian War of Independence. So that was a historic moment, at least for the Netherlands, not really so for Indonesia, because nobody really responded to it. But in the Netherlands, it was a big deal. And at the same time, a little bit more recently, 2024, there was actually first an exhibition about the Indonesian influence on the architectural style, the Amsterdam School style. First, this exhibition was held in Museum Het Schip in Amsterdam, and then it was moved to, in a slightly adapted version, to the Erasmushuis, the cultural center of the Dutch embassy in Jakarta. Also, what is happening, and that is between Indonesia and the Netherlands, is the return of Indonesian objects that were in Dutch national museums in the context of a Dutch policy that was adapted in 2020 22, so not so long ago, saying that there's a lot of objects from colonial context in the Dutch National Collection. A lot of these objects were stolen or taken in war situations in colonial context, and but luckily, now there is a policy that enables the Netherlands to return objects back. So here you see photos of two batches of objects that were returned to Indonesia. And the first batch of these objects was in 2023. There was a big exhibition in the recently reopened Museum Nasional in Jakarta. You see the photo on the bottom right. And actually, what is not in this slide is the third batch of objects was returned. There was a Dubois collection, a natural history collection that's about 28,000 objects were returned to Indonesia 2 weeks ago. So yeah, I'm actually doing PhD research on how young Indonesians use these revitalized Dutch colonial spaces. You heard a little bit more about the background and from Angie and Nadia, and it's not everything is as it seems, but here at least it looks like these buildings are being used, especially by young people. These are all images from Jakarta. And there is also a very strong interest of young people online in different blogs and in different Instagram sites, etc. So you see often young people taking photos with Dutch colonial buildings as a background. I know that it is not exclusively these buildings, but these buildings are also featured in the backgrounds of these photo shoots. And here on the right, you see two examples of cafes, restaurants, high-end in former Dutch colonial buildings that also really make use of their history in like the Jakarta Rasa Belanda, so the flavor of the Netherlands in Jakarta, and events, and Café Batavia at Taman Fathahila in Jakarta for the occasion of Dutch King's Day. So yeah, my PhD research dives more into understanding whether it matters to these young people in Indonesia that these buildings that are being revitalized, that this has a colonial context, like I already said before. And I'm doing that looking at 4 different types of spaces, museums, restaurants and hotels, multifunctional complexes, and public spaces in different Indonesian cities. That was all for me. And let's go to our last reflection by Sadia.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Remco, for your introduction. So I would like to share some reflections on the engagement of younger audiences with my exhibition entitled Beyond Unsettled Past, which is currently running at Erasmus House in Jakarta. The exhibition is co-curated with Sukiyato Kurniawan and the rest of my team at Culture Lab. The exhibition features 6 contemporary Indonesian artists in alphabetical order: Arahmayani, Budi Agung Kuswara, Dita Gambiro, Eldwin Pradipta, Elia Nurvista, and Maharani Mancanagara. These artists reflect on how Dutch colonial legacies continue to shape society, identity, and space in Indonesia today. They highlight traces of colonialism that often go unnoticed in daily life, and also imagine paths toward decolonial and more equal futures. So if you are in Jakarta or happen to come to Jakarta, come visit us. We are still open until the 1st of November. The core concept of the exhibition is coloniality. And with that, we mean the enduring legacies of colonialism today, which are explored through art. Colonial wounds of extraction and exploitation of nature and people, as well as social, economic, gender, and racial inequalities, are highlighted in the works on display. Paired with coloniality is decoloniality, which provide us with an opportunity to reject coloniality and relink with values, knowledge, and ways of living that existed already before colonialism. Decoloniality is a way to move beyond colonialism as represented by the Flag Project by Arahmayani. Cultural Lab generally targets millennials and Gen Z, which is also the case for this exhibition. We apply various strategies to engage audiences. So, first of all, the graphic design. We use bold colors in a generally colorful exhibition and perhaps unexpected in relation to the topic. We pay attention to public programs so that every 2 weeks there is an activation. So, for instance, we organize curatorial tours and also artist talks. Then we also provide kids labels, as you can see on the right bottom, and also a kids activity zine in which kids can color and they can do sort of like playful interactions with the artwork. This is also to encourage intergenerational exchange. So if kids don't understand what they're supposed to do, they need to ask the parents, and the parents need to read the labels. Then, lastly, we also have a very active social media campaign on Instagram. In the exhibition, we collect feedback through two questionnaires. So one is on the exhibition content and one on for public programs. And the feedback we received so far is very positive. Millennials and Gen Zs are generally drawn to the exhibition very much out of curiosity about Indonesia's colonial history. And many of them receive recommendations from friends, but also know about the exhibition through social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok. Many of the visitors describe the exhibition as eye opening, insightful, and also fun. And this shows, I think, that we were able to make a complex historical issues engaging and accessible. So visitors value the curatorial tours and also the supporting materials, and it helps them to connect with the topic and the artworks on a deeper level. And some of the audiences mentioned that the exhibition even resonates on a personal level and reminds them of family experiences, especially concerning the artworks dealing with Chinese Indonesian history. So I think this proves that history is not a distant subject, but continues to shape identity and daily life of younger generations. The strong and positive responses from the younger audiences reveal that Indonesian history and art are becoming essential to how these generations see themselves today. Rather than treating colonial history as distant, many millennials and Gen Z visitors use the exhibition as a space to critically reflect, question, and connect these narratives to their own lives. The exhibition is making history accessible and relatable, which enables younger visitors to integrate it into their sense of identity and belonging. Thank you so much. And now back to the moderator.
Yes, thank you so much, Ria, also for staying on time. Um, yeah, let's move on to our discussion because we now have 5 reflections. That was a lot of information in a very short time, and you see that we also struggled to keep with those 5 minutes. But the great news is that for the rest of our session, for the next 35 minutes, well, a little less maybe if we take off the closing, we have time for interaction. And to guide that interaction a little bit, we came up with 3 different topics to talk about. So that means that we have 3 times, well, now 10 minutes per topic for you, our audience, to interact. So please, if you are online, do share your feedback or your questions or your responses to the topics in the chat so that we can read it. And for those of you who are in the room, on location at the conference venue, I think there's a possibility for you to talk in the mic. All right, can we have the slide for the first topic, please? Yes, okay, let me go. Oh, sorry. We did it at the same time. So, and this is of course related to Gerlof's presentation. And I will just read it out. During several protests in the past years, all around the world, statues of historical figures have been pulled from their plinth. Some people argue for re-emergence of these statues, along with adding a new context. That's also what Gerlof explained in his last slide. And you see a nice Banksy post on the right that gives you a little bit more context. And our question would be, do you think that successful reemergence is realistic and why. And maybe if there is no comments yet in the chat, and maybe if there's no one in the audience in the venue that wants to respond, maybe one of our speakers can already respond to this in the meantime.
While we're waiting, I could still add
Yeah.
the thought that re-emergence is not per se about putting statues back on a pedestal that we're taking off. Re-emergence is about the re-emergence of history into the present. So it's often about these statues are still on their pedestal, and rather than reframing them by, for example, updating the plaque, and then the municipality thinks, all right, we've done our job. It's about artistic interventions, or what Banksy, this Banksy suggestion is always very funny because it will never happen because it's way too costly. But his idea is to have, this is a Colston statue in Bristol, to topple it slightly and to have 4 new smaller statues of activists always in the process of toppling the statue as a kind of, and this would be an example of re-emergence where we reactivate our thinking about history and about memory, basically using these statues in such a way.
Yeah. So maybe in the meantime, one of our other panelists, Sadia, Nadia, or Angie, can share some thoughts on this topic. What do you think? Oh.
Angie, you should go first.
Okay. Well, perhaps it's not really directly, but I think Herloff's presentation reminds me of my thesis when I was doing my master's on Soviet monuments in East and Central Europe's, and there are one particular monument, Soviet army in Sofia, that I was really intrigued with it, because the surrounding protests about the pros and cons of keeping this monument or not are going since the fall of the Berlin Wall, I guess. But the interesting part, from time to time, whenever the people, especially the young people, the young artists, um, have some restlessness towards the people in power, or toward repressions, they will vandalize this monument. One of them becoming into the figures of McDonald's, the Burger Kings, and then the government will clean it up, and then for next events when they have another opinions, they will again vandalize this. And I see that, well, my point at the time, I was, I wasn't against the removal of the monuments, because it's sort of becoming a performance arts in itself, that you can always record every time the artist vandalize them, and then after it's wiped clean, it's becoming another empty canvas, and you can express your voice again whenever the people in power, or or any issues that going on in the world bothers you. So yeah, I think that's my response.
Yeah, thank you. And I like the fact that you drew a connection to the post-Soviet situation, where also most post-Soviet societies deal with a similar problem as the post-colonial societies are dealing with, the idea of statues of Stalin and you name it, that all had to be either removed or reframed, etc. And there's also these initiatives where they create, I think in Budapest, they have a memento park where all the statues are, indeed moved to. So like an open air museum, and all the statues are taken out of the street view or the city view, but then placed in an open air museum together as a memento park. And I think that is an interest. It's just that the Netherlands doesn't really have enough open air to kind of create that, I think, unless they would somehow add it to the Arnhem Open Air Museum. But I mean, that's an interesting thought. The other thing you said is also a good thought, and it's a common one that is suggested, where that the statue can be used as a canvas for activists to place their slogans on, for example. Um, However, it's still a controversial issue, because the municipality would say often it's a matter of money. The municipality would argue, but then we always have to clean it, and who pays for the cleaning of the statue the whole time? Then also, where do we draw the line at some point? When how many slogans that say genocide and such like words do we allow on a statue in public space before it becomes too much or something? Do we just leave it all up forever, etc.?
Yeah.
It is good to
Great.
think.
Hey, Gerlof, I see we have, in the meantime, we have some comments in the chat, so maybe you can have from Sicko, you can have a look at that. But we actually have a live reaction from Bokor. Please. Oh, we don't hear you yet.
Yeah, you can't hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thanks.
Yes. My name is Sabine Amfer. I'm from the Hague University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, and actually it's absolutely not my expertise, but that makes some sessions extra interesting. And also, yeah, being in Indonesia only for the second time, I think all these buildings you've been showing through your presentation are extremely impressive. I've not seen them yet. I've mainly seen meeting rooms like this here. But I think the idea and the question you ask for the discussion is extremely interesting also to an audience which is not researching or on a daily basis thinking about how to deal with cultural heritage. And while listening to all your reflections, they have been equally interesting. I think it is important to re-emerge every time as history is repeating. And of course, the aspect of money is extremely important in our current society, but at least to try and give the effort to indeed re-emerge is worth it. And what I think actually Herlo just mentioned also place things in another physical context might help. So to get replace it in a different setting, because of course we are moving on, but I think it might help to place yeah, any kind of symbolic from the past, as long as of course not a building but statues and similar kind of images in a new environment, in a different environment where it leads to a new or different conversation or a new way of thinking or looking at things. So I would say yes, although I think there's not a yes and no which answers your statement.
Thank you.
Should I respond to it very quickly, or are we out of
Yeah,
time?
no, please do. We have some time.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for your reflection. Yeah, the idea of putting the statue in the museum has come up so many times, of course, especially because the West Frisian Museum is right there, and it's about the same, the 17th century. It's a 17th century museum, so it's not the same square. It's just a few meters away from where the statue currently stands. But then counter arguments to this that you often hear would be that the moment you put the statue into a museum, you change the context. So from a public space, it becomes a museum educational space, and then kind of there's a natural selection at the door that people who will now be confronted with the statue are people who bought a ticket to the museum, kind of knowing what they're getting into. So in a way, it becomes a preaching to the choir type situation, whereas a statue in public space perhaps allows for people to be confronted with history in an unexpected way. That's the argument. I don't think that I agree per se, by the way. I think it would be nice to replace the statue with something else, something that doesn't glorify a genocide committer, but that is still a form of post-colonial memory in public space that allows for different perspectives on what actually happened in the 17th century. Then we often hear the money argument, but then again, we learned from 2011 that if necessary, if the statue falls over by accident, the municipality suddenly spends 20,000 euros to put it back on its pedestal. So it's always a kind of relative question of whether there is or is no money objectively, or whether they don't want to spend it on particular things.
No.
Yeah, I think, this is how far we can get with it for now, but everyone is invited to email me with your thoughts. It's ongoing.
I was going to say, plug yourself. Gerlof has his own website. You can just Google his name and you'll find his website and his contact information.
Yeah.
And he's always happy to respond.
Thank you.
Good. Can we have the slide of the second topic?
Remco,
Yeah.
can I respond to Herlof?
Very,
Uh,
very brief, Nadia, because we need to move on to
yes,
your own topic, actually, of
yes. Okay,
discussion.
okay. It's 1 minute. Okay, Herlov. Perhaps this aligns with how Indonesia protects colonial era buildings as cultural heritage. I was once a member of the cultural heritage expert team for Jakarta, whose my task was to recommend the designation of an object, colonial object, as a cultural heritage. And when making a recommendation for designation, it must be accompanied by reason for the colonial object designation as cultural heritage and its significance to the Indonesian people. So, determining the significance of a colonial objects or building to the Indonesian peoples allows the object to re-emerge with a different perspective and also with a new interpretation. So that's my response. Thank you.
Very nice. Very good response, Nadia. Thank you so much. So can we now let's move on to the next one, the next topic. And I saw that we actually already have a response that is relevant in the Q&A box from Noah, my new friend, from originally from Surabaya, now studying in Singapore. Let me see. So the second topic for the next 10 minutes is a lot of colonial buildings in Indonesia are being revitalized through public and or private initiatives, as you have seen in the reflections by Angie and Nadia. However, it often happens that these buildings are not being used properly. How can we solve this, and how can young people play a role? Let's see. Shall we just go to Noah's? I don't know if you can all see Noah's comments, but also for our audience in Vogue or in the venue, I'll read it up. Hi, I'm Noah from the National University of Singapore. Restoration by public versus private initiatives were mentioned previously. Wondering how we should navigate through the challenges in revitalizing or restoring colonial spaces that have been long repurposed by the marginalized without pushing them away. So we're talking about bottom-up use. Huh? To contextualize from my research in Fort Kedung Joek in Surabaya, these sites are not dormant. Locals have been keeping the fort alive through bottom-up communal engagement, and a number of seemingly abandoned colonial buildings are converted as residence for the displaced. Yeah, Nadia and or Angie, would you like to respond to Noah's question or comments?
May I, Remco?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think this response from Noah is also one of a good example on how we can reuse that heritage building, because yes, I was involved in several projects from the government, and now there is no exact function of that restored buildings. Uh, and also, I always suggest to the government or to the owner of that buildings or the management that we should engage with the universities or with the school to use that space in that colonial heritage building, so that there's always an activities there in that buildings. One example that is quite good is the one in Bandung. There is a big depot from PT Kereta Api Indonesia, or the train company of Indonesia. That's uh, the the management have a big plan there, that building some apartments, hotels, and etc., while keeping this some buildings. And but before they start to the construction, they already engaged with the community. They already engaged with for instance, the Indonesian Institute of Architects to have activities there, uh, etc., so that this heritage sites is already full, already have a lot of activity before it is restored. So that's one of good example, I think. Thank you.
I wonder whether there's actually some kind of solution in this situation. Eh? So you have bottom buildings that are they're not revitalized yet. They are being used informally. Then once they are revitalized, because there is no proper plan made for it, they're then standing there empty,
Yeah.
beautifully restored, fantastic for Instagram photos and everything, or for
Yes.
wedding pictures, but not used.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Is there any other comments? Then maybe Angie, would you like to respond in the meantime? Because I don't see anything in the chat, and I also don't get a signal from the room.
Yeah, I think mostly Mbak Nadia already covered. But maybe if I can add, in the context of Kota Tua Jakarta, um, well, um, fortunately slash unfortunately, the buildings are mostly used to be offices and warehouses. So, but the revitalization projects did impact, or does impact now, the communities, the kampungs that lives around the core zone. um I think one of the interesting movement, or interesting programs that uh, to not displace the kampung recently. It was the Kampung Susun Kunir and also Kampung Aquarium, where the revitalization of the kampung that are so-called slum in our modern eyes, re, re, rebuilt into, well, in the hygiene and humanizing human part, successful, but at the same time, um, also try to engage the the people, the residents, during the design process, so that they are also part of the design process. It's not top down, although it's a government or public works project.
Hmm.
And also in the process, there are several participatory architects assist that they also not only designing for their living spaces in the future, but also learning the past of the site that they've been living for decades.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, what happened there, at least
Sorry,
in.
this is a very interesting case, an example you're mentioning, but I see there's also somebody in the room waiting to ask a question. So maybe you can just wrap up your example, and then we give the floor to this person.
Okay. Yeah, so I think yeah, Kampung Kunir is Kampung Susun Kunir is one of the good example in including the locals during the restoration process,
Yeah, great. Thank
especially
you
the
so much for.
marginalized ones.
Yeah, exactly. No, so there's also a piece of the solution is in there in these two successful examples, or three. I think there's even more of these examples. All right, let's go to the room.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, before let me introduce myself. My name is Kania. I am an international student, relations student. from Universitas Diponegoro, and actually, I would like to ask a question regarding what Mbak Angelin has mentioned before, that heritage preservation can be initiated by the private sector mostly, and since the local government might have too much thing on their hand, and they might have some difficulties in conducting a intense approach on heritage preservation. So, for example, actually, me and my team has conducted a research regarding the um, heritage preservation in Semarang, especially in Kota Lama, if you might know. And uh, it is now facing an obstacle for reaching the goal to be listed in UNESCO's World Heritage Site. And a few problems that we have, noticed that is the parts of the Semarang local governments, as you might know, like the dinas-dinas, yeah, has different views on this issue, and the community itself is also very, I guess, very um, like not having the same vision regarding this project. And one of the factors that we have found before, that international actors actually playing a role in heritage preservation, as we also have conducted research before. We have like an interview with um, Miss Bente Bergmans, actually the moderator from the previous session, and she has said that the Netherlands has also some kind of mechanism for the repatriation and some things that might have helped the project. And actually, I would like to know your opinion regarding this issue, and how far can the international cooperation can play a role in heritage preservation, and can it push the government or other stakeholders in conducting a more intense approach in heritage preservation? I think so.
Wow, thank you so much for your question. Um, there is an international component to it, so I can respond to that. But let's give the floor first to Nadia or Angie.
Um,
Not at the same time.
I think Angie, you can go first.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with Kota Lama Semarang, but with Kota Tua Jakarta, we were together listed on the tentative list. I think back in the 2015 or 16. Um, well, I think first of all, being listed on as a UNESCO World Heritage Site should not be the ultimate goal of uh, restoration and revitalizing heritage sites. Learning from Kota Tua, we receive the inputs as lacking authenticity, and this phenomena also what I saw recently in Semarang, where the public works, while they involve in the so-called revitalizing the Kota Lama with some street lights and the chairs, but it's sort of disconnected with the actual history of the city, such as there's this fountain, like a Parisian fountain, and then London phone booth.
Phone booths, yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I think uh, the role of the locals in Kota Lama begin to more important in this case, and I saw that there are several activities as well that I really appreciate, rather than focusing on the, you know, begging for the funds from the the central government or from
Yeah,
other international parties, because I do see the potentials, the locals could also be empowered by themselves.
yeah. Sorry, Angie. I noticed that we only have 10 minutes left in the session, and we still want to go to our last discussion topic. But before we do that, I will just very briefly say, like in response to the question from the lady in the audience, is that yeah, internationally seen, the Netherlands cannot play a role in preserving the buildings in Indonesia. That in itself would be a neo-colonial act, I think, if we would interfere with buildings that are Indonesian and no longer Dutch, unfortunately. So it's a very different case than in the restitution policy that was mentioned in the previous session. Anyway, let's have the last slide up, the last topic on the slide, please. Yes, I will move it. There we go. So young people are increasingly interested in heritage, as also shown in Sadia's reflection. And through social media, they can discover perspectives on history themselves. At the same time, the national historiography of Indonesia is being rewritten. So our question would be, to what extent do official narratives shape what young people think? And maybe in the meantime, if there is no, before we have a response in the chat or in the room, any of my colleagues want to respond to this? Sadia, maybe you want to reflect on this?
Yeah, maybe I can just reflect a little bit based on the feedback that we get from the visitors to the exhibition, and I guess in general, how younger audiences, millennials and Gen Z, interact or engage with the content that Culture Lab puts out, either through exhibitions or on social media. Is that a lot of the feedback that we get, for example, is that I think one thing is very clear, that the content that we produce is quite niche. I think it is very much about decolonizing history from a decolonial perspective. Um, so it really comes from a very sort of like critical approach. And that is what usually the core audience of Culture Lab really appreciates. So that we provide a different narratives, or we present stories and histories that have been marginalized and hidden, and that they find a way into sort of like a more public discourse. And that is something that I see that is being appreciated, and this is especially appreciated in terms of like sort of like the more critical approach to dominant narratives.
Yeah, so I guess I feel a kind of common thread in our discussion so far. So there is somewhere a solution can be with young people, bottom-up initiatives, etc. Right? But how does that reflect? And maybe this is a question for the audience or for any of. Oh, I see. There's another question. Anyone in the audience is like, so if young people are the key and they have they have the, maybe through their use of social media, of being connected, of meeting people, of seeing all these online platforms, etc. So on the one hand we see this, and on the other hand we see, what is the official history that's being taught to people, to young people in schools, for example, right? So is that is that gonna clash at some point? Has that already been clashing in Indonesia ever since Indonesia became an independent country? What do we think?
Is this for the audience or?
Yeah, well, it's for the audience, but it's a bit hoe zeg je dat? I think for review now, for now.
Well, like if there is no reflection or no, because I
No, maybe
cannot
Angie wants to
see.
say something.
Oh,
She was
okay.
unmuting herself.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, maybe I just want to shortly respond to Sadia's statements that I don't believe in official history, because history, it's not singular, it's not linear, so it's unique and everyone has their own. So yeah, the whole idea about this official history, it's just so absurd for
Yeah.
our generations. And for the school, well, I grew up in the New Order partly, and then Reformation. The history was told very top down, and we were just memorizing stuff at the time. Well, I do hope that in the future the curriculum will start to engage the students with more of their own opinions and their own stories as well.
Mhm. Really make use of their own, zeg je dat? Digital literacy, basically, right?
Yeah, yeah, and putting something in the context, not just memorizing dates and names.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. I see we have a question from the audience in Bogor. Please.
All right, thank you. I'm Greta from Jakarta, and I am from Manasa Society of Indonesian Manuscript, which are association for philologists in Indonesia. I would like to maybe add a bit of my thought about the third discussion about how social media shape the young generation about history. Actually, when I saw the social media, I found new perspective about history or museum itself because currently there has been so many projects that is curated by museums and makes the museum becomes more interactive, just like in Museum Macan or many museum which installed many interactive programs, and it seems that the program has always been changing time by time, and fortunately there has been many people who recorded it and posted it in a kind of story that makes the museum itself becomes more engaging, and it changed and shaped my perspective to see. First I saw a museum as maybe a repository of old artifacts that maybe honestly it's not interesting, but after some people package it with some immersive activities, and it becomes a new spaces that I saw in social media that makes me engage and want to visit it. Moreover, I think about historical sites in Indonesia, maybe related to previous discussion. I think just I think the most suitable way is a top-down activities, just like government should put kind of curriculum that enables people to visit like museums, because in my hometown in Tulungagung, I think it works and it engages like students, like high schoolers, and that makes them visit the museums, because I think if it's not obliged, maybe uh, the young people will not be interested to come to museum. And honestly, in my hometown in East Java, visiting museum or historical site is the least choices. Yeah, I think that's all. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you for your comments and question. Maybe Sadia, would you like to respond to this? And we have actually very short. I know we're going to kicked out of this session within a few seconds, but maybe you can still respond.
Yeah, no, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's very short. No, what I was just saying, I guess, like in relation also to what AG was saying is, and what you were mentioning, Remco, like has this been happening since, for example, Indonesia's independence? But I think that is the interesting thing about history, right? It's in principle, history is written by the victor, but it's also always a negotiation of how we write about the past or how we want to see and understand the past. And I think that is something that we are sort of like experiencing and living at this moment in Indonesia, where there are a lot of interpretations and different perspectives and experiences. And that is a negotiation that is happening as we speak.
All right. Thank you so much, Sadia. And I wish we had more time, but 75 minutes just goes really fast. Thank you very much for our audience in the venue. Thank you very much for those of you who were listening to us online. And Angie, is it okay if I just wrap up right now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all, the four of you, for being in this session. It was a pleasure to prepare and do this with you. And thank you to the Winner organization for making this happen.
Thank you. Terima
Bye.
kasih.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Okay, thank you everyone. We can end our call for 30 minutes.